time we set up the ability to go near objects, have dynamically changing pop-ups show up, and we set up a few values, these booleans here, for use later on. What we're going to have a look at doing today is having the inventory system work, which if I play my game, there will be 3 boxes down the bottom. I want those to update with different images depending on the items I have available. Right click, create a script. One is going to be a collectible. This is going to be given to every single item that I can collect to help define what it is. It'll have a name and a picture. And lastly, I'm going to have my inventory manager. The inventory manager is going to be the main script that we're going to be using. It's going to be able to hold all the items that we have, add, remove, check if the item's just in the list. It's going to be able to display the items to the screen. It's going to be doing all of that for us. So at the start, we're going to set up the collectible. The collectible is going to do 2 things. Have 2 values, I should say. It's going to have a public string. This is going to be its name. And it's going to have a public sprite. This is going to be its sprite. We'll call these item name and item sprite, just so that we're super clear what each one is for. And because we are using a sprite, which is a UI element, we do need to import UnityEngine.ui. So one of the objects that we can pick up is going to be this axe. I'm going to give the collectible script to the axe because the axe is a collectible. The sprite name, item name is going to be axe, and the item sprite is going to be this axe sprite that I drew earlier. Now we only ever want one instance of the inventory manager. So to make that super clear, I'm going to create an empty object. I'm going to call it game manager. So I'll update this to say awake. And once again, the reason that we're using awake is so that it doesn't happen at the first frame. It happens as soon as this item is created, or if we create an item halfway through. And I'm going to make 2 public references. One to the pop-up script. We'll call it's called pop-up. And one to the inventory manager script. We'll call this one IM. Call it inman. Edger. As soon as we wake up, we want to do those 2 things. We want to search. We want pop-up to equal. Now we don't need to search the entire area. We can just write this dot game object, which will get the game object that the script is attached to. Dot get components, and the component we're getting is of course pop-up script. This does mean that every collectible does need to have a pop-up script. Of course, we need to get an inventory manager. So my in manager is going to equal, and this is one that I am going to need to search and find. GameObject.find. And I want to find the thing that I just made called Game Manager. And I'll get its components. I want to get its inventory manager script. So now our axe is looking for a pop-up and a in manager. I'll try to play it. These should dynamically update because they're in the awake, so it has linked to the axe trigger script called pop-up script, this one, and the game manager script called inventory manager. Here. Hide an inspector so that I don't accidentally change them. So I'll set that up. If my popup dot e pressed. The reason I can do this is because I can access everything with the public tag in front of it from popup as long as I write popup first. For now, I'm just going to debug.log add item. I just want to do those two things of deactivating the script and deleting the child, which is the model. As we see in Unity, every single trigger area with a pop-up script has a drop-down, and the first thing in that drop-down is the actual model itself. I want to destroy transform.getChild, and I'm going to get child at position 0. So counting from 0 upwards, I want to get the first thing. And I want to destroy that entire game object. I do that by writing game object.setActive to be false. That means that this entire game object, the entire trigger area that this is attached to, will be turned off. It'll still exist in the scene, technically, but it's turned off. That's so that I can still access this collectible script, quite importantly, because that's holding all the information about what is an axe. Watch both the hierarchy and the console. The inspector should update. So I walk over to the here, press E. It's trying to add an item. It's doing it forever. So as soon as that add item is triggered, right here, I then want to go back and say popup dot deactivate popup. The reason that we're doing it here and not in the pop-up script is because we want the pop-ups to be as dynamic as possible. Anything could happen. Looking at the hierarchy on the left, this is now turned off. Turning it back on will cause some errors. And it hasn't got a child. It can't drop down anymore. The axe model itself is gone. Now we can focus on the inventory itself. The inventory manager needs to have two things. It's going to have an array, so both these will be public, an array of collectibles, so that we can access everything about the collectible. Make it an array, we do this 2 squares here. And we need this thing to be called the inventory. When we first declare it, we're going to make it a new collectible array. And we're going to set it to have 3 items. If your inventory is going to have more than 3, you can set it to have more than 3. We're then going to set up an array of images. These are going to be the image items on the canvas that are going to output these sprites. We're going to call this one image outputs. And once again, it's going to be set up right now to have 3 slots. Because we're using images, we need to get access to UnityEngine.ui update. So what update is going to do is we're going to write update slots. This is going to update the images, the slots. So if ever we use an item and it's removed one halfway through our images, so let's say we use the second out of all 3 of our items, it's going to get rid of, well, our remove item will get rid of it. This is going to fill in that slot so that all the items are always filled from the first one to the right. So we're going to do 3 things. Firstly, we're going to loop for the entire available loop. So we're going to loop an int that we'll call x. We'll call it loop. We'll start at number 0. We're going to have loop go between 0 and, as long as loop is smaller than our inventory's size, length, we're going to have it keep increasing. Midge. Probably a capital L here. So this is going to loop through every single slot that we have available from 0 to the last slot. And we're just going to be checking if the inventory item at the current loop iteration is null, so there's nothing there, and the inventory item at the next loop iteration is not null, then we want to shuffle it down. So we'll say, okay, make the current inventory item, the one that we've just found out is null, equal to the next one. And then make the next one null. This will work all the way up to one less than our loop, because we can't be checking if the last item and the thing after the last item, because the thing after the last item doesn't exist. So we'll just make sure that this only loops if loop is less than our length minus 1. Now we need to do the pictures. So we'll set up some pictures here. All we're going to do is simply if the inventory item at the loop is not equal to null, so there's something in there. This is after this little check and we've done any shuffling that we need to do. Then we're going to have the image output at point loop equal the inventory item at point loop dot, and once again we can access anything a collectible can do because this is a collectible, and we're going to get its image sprite. Else, so if it is null, we're just going to have the image outputs, at point loop also be null. We're going to have at the very start of our program, we're going to update all the slots. And to make this happen, we need to make some fake items. Sprite. Game Manager has a couple things. It's got two arrays set up. One's full of these images. I want to make sure that they are sprite 1, sprite 2, and sprite 3. If I had more, I'd set more. I can always change this so that there are more, but I do not need to do that. These here are the actual items we've collected. Currently we've got none, none, and none. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a fake item. So I'm going to create an empty thing. I'm going to call this one fake item. And all items are going to have a pop-up script and a collectible script. The sprite for this is going to be this like letter envelope. And we're going to call this one the letter. We now see that it's moved down 1. This item is a fake item. Zip that up for now. I'm going to need a void, public void, add item. And while we're here, I'll also make a public void remove item. And lastly, I'll make a public boolean check for item, and we'll say item to check for. Whenever we add item, we need to be told what item we're going to be adding. So we're going to be parsed a collectible. And whenever we remove item, we're going to be told an item to remove. So we'll be told the name of the item. So these are our 3 methods here. Always going to update the slots so that it looks nice. Is we need to find if there are any empty slots, and we're going to be using a very similar loop to what we did up here. In fact, I'm just going to copy the start of this loop, so I don't have to write it every time. If there are any empty slots, then put this new item in there. So this is looking at every single slot between 0 and the length. All we're doing is checking if the slots in the inventory is empty. We've successfully found an empty slot. That's cool. We just want that slot to equal the item that we want to add. And I'm going to add this keyword here, break. That means break out of the loop and do the next thing, because we don't really care about this loop happening again. If it was to happen again, then the next slot could also be empty, and we could add another one. Copy the for loop that I already had. This is looping through it. I want to be checking each item if the inventory at point loop dot item name equals the item to remove, then I want to get rid of it. I want the inventory at point loop to equal null. And break. The reason for the break is just in case we've got multiple of that same item. If we're collecting keys and we've got 5 keys and we want to use one, we don't want to lose all of our keys by doing that. So that's what the break here is doing. And lastly, check for item is a unique one. It's going to have a return type of a bool, so we'll set up the bool it's going to return. We'll call it if it was able to find the item. By default, it's not able to find the item. It's going to do this very same thing here. I'm going to copy that again. Paste. If the inventory item, and I'm looking for the item to check for, then I want found to equal true. I could break here, which would be a more efficient way, because as soon as it finds the item, it breaks out of the loop and will return a value. Or I could not, because it's so few items, that extra little bit of processing won't matter. But at the end, I'm going to return if I was able to find it or not. Alright. Now we are done completely with this script. The collectible itself, where we're just outputting add item, we're actually going to add the item. We're going to be using our inventory manager dot add item. We need to pass it a collectible. We're just going to pass it this. I'm going to set the pop-up to be false. One equal sign. Our update loop. We are updating the whole things to be null. We only want to update the sprites to be null if there is nothing in there. Here we go. Now when I walk over to the axe over here, I have collected the axe, its sprite is there, it is physically gone from my game. I have the axe, I can now set it up so that I can kill the rats and leave in the next video.